How's it going, everyone? Thank you for joining us today. My name is Chun-Heng Tai, and I'm a software engineer in Google. So today we're going to talk about inherited widgets and how to do your own state management. Before we start, if you want to participate in this workshop, you can get the link in the content description below. If you don't find it, that is okay. I have it here. It's flutter.dev/go/inherited-widgets-workshop. Again, it's flutter.dev/go/inherited-widget-workshop. So once you enter the URL in any modern browser, you should see the same web page as I'm presenting right now. On the left-hand side, you can see a instruction for every step. And on the right-hand side, you should see IDE where the code lives. And then there will be a run button on the top right. If you click it, you should see the UI panel shows the output of the UI screen. There is no prerequisite software to install in order to participate in this workshop because everything is running with Flutter on web. So before we start, let's talk about what is the app state and what's the motive behind this workshop. So app state is any data that is stored in your app and that your app build a UI based on those data. And those data may change based on user interaction. And then, for example, like a button press, if you user press a button, it might change the state, the data stored in your app, and your app may display different content based on the data. So an example of that is any stateful widgets in your app is likely to contain some state that will determine the UI of your app. So let's say if you starting building your app and then you starting to use stateful widgets in a lot of places in your app, and then you feel at some point you keep adding more stateful widgets and they all have their own state. At some point you might feel it's quite difficult if, let's say, two different stateful widgets that should share the same state. But since all the stateful widgets stay the state locally, you will need to write logic to sync the state between each stateful widgets. So sync can quickly become out of hand if you add more and more stateful widgets that share the same state, but they sit across a different part of the screen. That's why that's the moment when you may want to consider to build your own state management systems, so that you will have a central place to store all your state, and your UI component does not need to care about what other UI component depends on the state. And that's the approach we'll be taking today. And I will give you a general rundown on how today's workshop will be like. First, we will take a look at our example app, and then this example app is written in a way that it has a lot of stateful widgets which all store their own state. And then we will identify what state should be considered app state in those stateful widgets. And then we will build our state data model to represent the state. And then we will use that data model to create a centralized state management systems. Once we have that, we will go through each stateful widgets and migrate those stateful widgets to use the centralized state management system one by one. And then finally, we will have an app that use a central stateful management systems, and so that we don't need to worry about syncing state in between different UI elements. Okay, now let's take a look at the code. So when you click the run button, you can see the UI output. So this app is a mock for Google Store. And in the app bar, there is a search button where you can type any search phrase to search a certain product. And then there's also a shopping cart icon. So there's the body is a scrollable list, and then it contains Google product with a button that you can add to cart. And when you add to cart, you can see the shopping cart icon got updated. And then you can add multiple products to a cart, and you can also remove from cart as well. And the shopping cart icon will update based on what's products in cart. So let's get started and let's move on to the next step. So in this step, we want to define our state model. So the first thing we want to do is we want to take a look at the code and to see what kind of state should be in the data model. And based on, let me hide this. Based on the look at this app, we know that at least two UI component has a state. The first one is the scrollable body that it need to store what product it need to display and which product is in the cart, because it will display a different button based on that. There's also need to be a state inside the shopping cart, because it need to know how many product is in cart, so it can display a number besides its icon. So those two widgets, the scrollable body is corresponding to product list widgets in the code, and the shopping cart icon is corresponding to shopping cart icon widgets in the code. So let's take a look at those stateful widgets. You can do it by do a simple search. This one, class here. So product list widget is, let me close this for now. Product list widgets is a stateful widgets, and in the state, I store a list of a product list to be displayed on the screen. And also I store a set of items in cart, so that this widget can use this set to look at whether a product is in the cart or not, to display a different button like add to cart or remove from cart. And now let's look at the shopping cart icon. It's also a stateful widgets, and then in its state, it stores a set of items in cart. So this is where things get interesting. You notice both widgets store the same sets, item in cart, and they need to be kept in sync. Because whenever user add the item into a cart, it not only need to update the purchase list, it also need to update the shopping cart, the state in shopping cart icon. So let's look at the product list widgets. Inside the state, you can see two methods. One is handle to cart, handle add to cart. The other one, handle remove from cart. In this method, it updates its own state. It also need to access the shopping cart state and update the state there. So you can imagine if in the future the app gets more complicated, we add a new widget that depends on item in cart. Not only you need to store the app locally in that widgets, you also need to go into any update methods in other widgets to also update the state in the new widgets. So this can get really complicated really quick, and it also become really error prompt, because if you miss one place, you may have a bug that's hard to debug. So now we know the state that's stored in these two widgets. Let's define our data structure. So the two things we want to store here is product list and items in cart. And so let's do that. You can go to, you can go to the to-do in the hint. So it will notify which, it will bring you to a place where you need to insert your code. So in here, I want to define my own product list here. And then There's a set. I also want to. Oops. Okay, let's hide this for now. Okay, so we define this in the data class. Let's create a constructor. So the constructor should take in both product lists, and item in cart. And then we can give it a default value because item in cart always start with empty. Then we give a const value because it can be a const. Okay, so now we take care of the constructor. We define our own data field inside it. There is a method we want to implement. It's called copy with. So this method is a convenient method to duplicate a state objects with a new product list or item in cart. This will be useful when later on we implement the method to update the app state. So let's do this. We can copy over most of the stuff and then remove the final keyword. And it can be doable if user only want to update one of them, not both of them. So the copy methods, we return a new state objects. And then we can do state equal to the product list equal to, if there's any passing, we use that. If not, we use our existing one. So the user can update just one of them. Okay. So items in cart, items in cart, items in cart, and then semicolon. Cool. So this should be our data model if we want to extract those state outside of the product list widgets and shopping cart icon. Okay, now let's move on to the next step. So this is where inherit widget come to play. So now we have our data model that stores the state. We need a widget to host it on top of the widget tree so that the subtree can access those data. So inherited widgets is a specialized widgets that it can take an arbitrary data, and then it will host the data for the subtree. And then another important thing it does is whenever it detects the data changes, it will notify every widget that listen to this data to rebuild, so that they will grab the latest data and update the UI. Let's look at, let's go to the part where we want to implement this. It's for some reason the link does not pop up, but it's okay. Okay, so here, app state scope, extend the inherit widgets. We want to create a subclass that hosts the data. So the first thing we want to do is this should take a state data. Oh, sorry. App state data. We should store this. And then, oh, no, it pop up. Let me hide this. And then I want to create my constructor here, taking the data, and then we also take a key, because every widget should have a key, and then widgets subtree. Oops. And then it can call superclass. The superclass taking the key as well. And then the children subtree. Let me this a little bit. Okay, let's see. Okay, actually, there's a format button I can probably use. No format change. Okay, sure, I'll do it manually. Okay, so now we have, oops, this should be in the previous line. Okay, and then here, so it's probably easier to see this way. Here we go. Cool, so we taking care of the constructor. Children, what's he complaining about? Widget children has a value of null because the type by explicitly default value is null. Oh, here it needs to be required. That's why. Okay. Now that's see. There's two more methods we want to implement. The first, that's take a look at the update should notify methods. So this method will be called whenever this inherited widget detects there is a new data that is given to this widget. So in this method, if you return true, the inherited widget will go ahead and update and notify the subtree to rebuild. If you return false, it will not do anything. That's giving you a chance to determine whether you really need to update. Like, is the data actually changed or not? But for here, we will just return data. We just do a comparison directly because each change we always rebuild. In more complex example, you might want to write a more complex comparing methods, but that will be depends on like how you want your app to act in certain case. So now let's move on to the next method we want to update. It's the .off methods. So this will be a convenient method for any subtree using its context to access this inherited widgets. In here, you need to use a spatial method called depends on widget. Oh, actually, let me look this up. This is always kind of complex whenever I want to use it. But let me see. So it's called depends on widgets. Let me do a quick search on what this method is. Okay, so it's called depend on inherited widget of exact type. And in here, you want to give your own subclass type, so you will find the right widgets context dot depends on widget of exact type. And then because this may return null, we just use the exclamation mark, so it will become a non-nullable methods. Okay. So now, oops. So what does this function does? This function does two things. The first thing is it will try to find the same inherited widgets with the type you pass in, and then it will return that inherited widget to you. It also does another thing. It will notify the inherited widgets, hey, there's a new context is listen to the data objects. Whenever the data change, you need to notify those context rebuild. So this is why we want to use this methods, because if any subtree do the off methods, that means they try to access the app state. And the reason they try to access the app state is likely they want to build different UI based on the app state. So whenever they data change, those UI want to be notified and rebuilt. So this take care of this methods. Okay, let's move on to the next step. So now we have our app state scope, which is the inherited widgets that take a state and host it for the subtree. But the inherited widget itself does not have a state. So we need to create a stateful widget to wrap around the app state scope, which actually owns the state, as well as providing API for the subtree to modify the state it owns. And then this app state widgets will then take the state that's stored inside the widgets, and then use the app state scope to host the data. So let's go to the to-do app state widgets. Let's just search it directly. So I have almost all the skeleton code I provided. So you only need to implement part of the stateful widget. Let's take a look at it. So this is stateful widget. You create app state widget state, which is the state, and in the state, it create app state data by getting the product list from the server, and then and the rest we need to implement. Let's first take a look at the build methods. In this methods, we want to take app state data and create and pass it into the app state scope and return it as a widgets. So in here, we want to do app state scope. And then we pass in the data as the first precision argument. And then we pass in our widget subtree dot child. And that should take care of the build methods. And there is also an API to mutate the data that's stored in this widgets. So the first one is the set product list. You take a new product list. So in here, what we want to do is we want to check whether the list actually changed or not. Product list. If they are actually different, then we go ahead and update the product list. So we do a set state. Okay, so in here we do data equal to data.copy with, and then we pass in the new data product list. Okay, so let's take care of this methods. Add to cart, take an ID, and it should add the ID into the set. So what we want to do here, we do similar stuff. First, we want to make sure the ID is not in the cart already. Items in cart. Contents. If it's not contain the ID already, then we definitely want to add that to the sets. Okay, so set state here, we need to be careful because we want to create the exact copy of the item in cart to prevent shadowing, because we don't want them to use the same reference. It may cause confusion for the widget subtree. So we do this by doing set.from. So this should give us the exact copy for this methods. Okay, so we have new item in cart, and then we add the ID. And then we use the same methods, but this time we provide a new item in cart. Well, all right, this should take, what is this complaining about? Okay, I have an extra parentheses and then remove from cart. We do the same thing for remove from cart, but this time we want to make sure the ID is not in the card. Oh, it's actually in the card. So that's mean we really have something to remove. Cool. So that's all for the update methods. Let's take a look. There's also a .off methods. Okay, so this is also a convenient method that we can use to get the state so that widget subtree can have access to the state to the API. We can do context.find. Let me look it up. I believe it's called find ancestor state of type. Yep. So this methods. So in here we're passing our state. Okay. Cool. So this method does a similar thing as the depends on widget of inherited widget of exact type. Instead, it does not it does not have any mechanism to notify the subtree whenever a state change, but it's not needed. If the widget try to use this API, they just update the state. That doesn't mean they are listening to the state to build a new UI. So that is fine to use this method to get the .off methods. To implement .off. Okay, so now we have, I think that's everything for this step. Okay, let's move on to the next step. Here, so now we have implement our own app state widgets that will provide API for the widget subtree to change the state. And you also create app state scope that hosts the app state to a subtree, and then the subtree can listen to the state. So what we want to do now is we actually insert this state management system into the widget into our widget subtree. And in here, we want to insert it above the material app, so entire material app has access to this app state widgets. So we can do this by define our own stateful widgets, app state widgets, and we pass the entire material app as children. Here we do this. Okay, basically wrapping the app state, the material app with under the app state widgets. Cool. This should be it for this step. Okay, now, so now we have the app state widgets that the entire subtree can access, update, and listen to the state. In the next few step will be we want to start migrating the stateful widgets to use app state widgets. So the first one, let's start with the shopping cart icon. Let's go to, there's a bunch of to do here. Okay, the first one is the global key. We want to remove this because we will, all the entire widget subtree will access the app state widget directly. So we don't need the global key anymore. So this should give us some, okay, so here, wait. Let me see. So app state widgets in here. Oh, not this one. Sorry. So my sort page, I remember somewhere here is still using the shopping cart icon. Oh, it's fine. We'll figure it out. Okay. So the next to do here is to convert shopping cart icon to a stateless widgets. The first thing we want to do is copy paste the stateless widgets, and then let's move the copy over the entire build methods from the state class, and then completely remove this and then paste it here. And then we're not using the state anymore, so we can remove it. Well, we complain about item in car is cannot be found in this widgets. We can get this data easily by accessing the app state, which is app state scope dot off context dot item in cars. Yes. This should give us the icon in car, and then that's all you need for this build methods. Okay. So now let's see. There is some issue I may need to fix. Okay, so the global key is removed, so we don't need this anymore. And then this is the product list widgets, and because it should try to get the global key to get the state, but since we will change this in the next step, let's just remove this for now. Oh, that should run this. And then let's see, is it updated yet? Okay, so now everything's still run. And add to cart, it doesn't update. That's expected because this widget, the product list widget, is still using its own state. It's not using the app state widget. So that's why it does not update. So that is fine because our next step will be migrating the product list widgets. Okay, let's take a look at this to do. Remove the global key usage. And then complaining about a lot of stuff. Okay, notice there is a toggle search. This method will be called whenever user enter a search phrase in the search box in the app bar. So in that toggle search, you also need to access the state of the product list to update the product list so it can display a different content. For the purpose of this step, that's removed for now because we will need to update this when we migrate the search box. So it's just complaining about this. Don't worry about it. And then here, because we removed the global key usage, we don't need to pass in here. And then the to do is migrate this into a stateless widgets. Let's do the same thing as before. We copy all the methods. Let me hide this. We copy all the methods that's needed to implement the build methods and literally paste it in the stateless widget class. And we no longer need a state, so we just remove all of that. Cool. And a lot of error, but that's fine. Let's start with the build methods. Product list. We can get this in the app state scope dot off context product list. So this should give us the product list. And then inside here, build product tile, you need to have access to items in cart. This will be a little bit inconvenient because it does not have a build context. So when you want to pass the build context in. So assume we have a build context for this class. We can get the item in cart by doing the same thing here. And since we change the function signature, so we need to make sure we pass in the context here. So we take a string ID as before. Let me see. Linking start getting a little bit out of hand. Let me try to make it look better. Okay, so the map, let's take a string ID and then we pass the ID as before, and we also pass in the context. This that should take care of this message. Yep, no more complaint. And let's look at the handle attribute. In this message, you need to update the item in cart. So remember, we have app state widgets that provide those APIs. So app state widgets of field context add to cart. I hope I didn't spell anything wrong here. And then we put in the ID. And we don't need this anymore. And then we can do remove from cart. The same thing here, but then it's complaining about it does not have a context, but that's fine. We can pass in from the color. It shouldn't be too hard because we all have a context drilled down to this message already. Okay, so this should take care. Let me see. Okay, those are just warning. This should take care of this widgets. Let's try to run this and see how it works. Okay, we add to cart. Yeah, we see the icon updates. That is good. And then we can remove from cart as well. But then when we try to type search box, it doesn't work. Why it does not? It's because we remove the global key usage in the search box. That's why it doesn't work. Don't need to worry about this because on the next step, we will be migrating the search box. So let's go to the target search. Here, we want to set the product list to server.get product list. And so we can do something like app state widget dot of context dot set prod dot list. Okay, and then we just call the search the server API. Let me. Okay, I think it's asking. Oh, yeah, that's just delay. So this should take care of this methods, and then but notice we don't have a context. Oh, actually, we have a context here because this is the state. This is the state of the stateless widgets. I mean, stateful widgets. So we have context. And in here, we want to do is send, but we pass in the filter phrase. Right. This should take care of the toggle search. Cool. Let's try to run this and see if this works. Okay, now let's try to type something here. Yes, the product list get updated. And then you can type different stuff and see. Oops. Pixel. Yeah, you can search pixel, and if you close it, it will return back. All right. So that's the end of this workshop. And then so we have successfully migrated the entire app to use the state management system we created during the workshop. So if you want to learn more about the inherited widgets, you can visit the inherited widget API document page, the API doc website, or you can go to the YouTube, the Flutter widget 101 for inherited widget, where it talk about some basics about the inherited widgets. And yeah, that's it. Thank you everyone for participating in this workshop, and hopefully there's something you can apply to your app. And thanks again for being here.